Hi, I'm Mitch, and welcome to the Restoration Road. Today is the first of two parts with my very good friend, Sergeant Joe Cox. I had asked Joe to come be on the show to talk about how he applies his faith to his everyday career, putting himself in harm's way. What I learned was Joe has experienced an incredible valley in his life. And yet, the God of the universe carried him and others through that valley. In Psalm 23, David, who knew a lot about mountaintops and valleys, said, "Even though I walk through the darkest valley, the valley of the shadow of death, you are with me." Maybe today you're going through something quite difficult, and you need to turn to the God of the universe who will carry you through that darkest valley. Joe, thank you so much for being with us today. You're a sergeant in the Allen County Sheriff's Department. You have an amazing story that you've endured, and I want you to talk about that. First of all, how did you decide that you wanted to be a cop?
Well, my dad is a retired Fort Wayne officer. I've always wanted to do that, even though he tried to discourage it. And after 6 years in the Marine Corps, I came back. I tried not to do that job for a while. And after a couple of years of working in a cabinet shop and knowing I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life, I thought, no, I'm just going to do it.
They say once a Marine, always a Marine. What was the Marine Corps like for you? Where did you go and what did you do?
6 years, 9 months of school because I was in a kind of a technical field, avionics, worked on helicopters. Did a couple of 6 month, well, one turned into 7.5 or 8 months deployment. It was during the Gulf War, the first Gulf War. Got to spend some time in the Middle East. The coolest part for me was getting to go to Israel 2 times.
Wow.
Then when we flew into where we were put in Incirlik, or in Turkey, Salopi, Turkey, we flew in, the helicopters flew, we followed the Tigris River, I believe it was. So just to look down and see that river was amazing. And then where we were, our base camp was just north of where the ancient city of Nineveh would have been.
No kidding.
Got to fly over and see that city. I think it's Mosul. Got to fly over that and see that. It was very interesting.
Oh, that's amazing.
Fascinating.
So you come back from the Marine Corps and you're fighting whether or not you should be on the force, and you finally decide that's where you're being led?
Yes.
And then tell me how you met Angela.
I knew her in high school. She was 2 years behind me, class of '89. My sister's friend. She actually spent the night at my house a couple times, and I found out later that she had liked me then, and I wasn't interested in my sister's friends. So I came home on leave, but just before I left for my first 6-month deployment over to the Mediterranean, and it was around Thanksgiving, and I ran into her at church. It's Grace Fellowship now. It was New Haven Baptist Church back then. Ran into her at church and noticed her and thought, I wonder if she's still interested. So I sent her a Christmas card.
That's nice. That's a nice move.
I thought it was pretty smooth.
I like that.
So that started some letters back and forth while I was over in the Mediterranean. We just wrote letters back and forth. Started a date, and it was a pretty short courtship. The next year I asked her to marry me, and the rest is history.
It sure is. At what point did you surrender your life to Christ as Savior and Lord?
I grew up in a Christian home, which I'm so thankful for. I was about 6 years old when I made the decision. Now, it didn't really stick until about my sophomore, junior year in high school is when I got serious about my faith.
So you had a foundation of faith when you were with the Marine Corps, and
yes,
I assume that really helps you get through all
absolutely.
of that.
My pastor at the time, Gordon Smith,
set
me up with a guy who was in the Marine Corps. an officer friend of his, and I had breakfast with him at Hall's in New Haven. And I'll never forget it. And it was that day, that morning, that I don't even remember his name, but that man challenged me. As a young man going into the Marines, who's a believer, he said, you need to get it straight right now. You're not going to ride the fence in the Marine Corps. He said, you're going to be on this side of the fence or you're going to be on this side of the fence. He said, you need to decide now and then stick with it. And his advice meant the world to me, especially looking back, because I chose to go to this side and follow Christ. Got connected in churches wherever I was at, off base usually, but there was good things on base. Good friends, made good choices, didn't go out drinking, partying. So very, very thankful for that advice.
Oh, that's awesome. God brought him at just the right time.
Absolutely.
In your life. How does Angela know that there's anything wrong? You haven't been married very long where she notices something.
We were laying in bed one morning. The window was open. It was, I believe, a spring morning, beautiful outside. Just talking, and she said, this is weird. She goes, what is this? And she had me feel her stomach, and you could feel something hard. It wasn't in my abdomen. Mm-hmm. And we also at the same time began to notice kind of a jaundice color, a yellowish color into her skin. So that started the process of going to a doctor, and it was first the military doctor. They sent her to another doctor on base who was a hernia specialist of some sort. They did a colonoscopy, which I'll never forget how hard that was for her. They discovered through the medical test that it was not a hernia, that they thought it was some kind of a tumor. But they felt it was out of their league, so they sent her to University, North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
And where were you at that time?
Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Okay. So you go to UNC Chapel Hill, and they're going to do some tests? Or?
They run some tests. They do a biopsy. Again, more painful stuff to watch her go through. And they discover that it is a tumor. They think it's non-malignant, but they got to go in and get it out. So they scheduled the surgery. We had Angie's mom fly down from Fort Wayne to stay with our then six-month-old daughter, I believe, while I went to Chapel Hill with her, and we had the surgery done.
And what happened in the surgery, and what did the doctors think afterwards?
The surgery went well. They took half of her liver out. That's where I learned that the liver is one of the only 2 organs in the body that will regenerate itself. They felt very confident. The guy who did the surgery was Dr. Bunzendahl, a big German guy. He did the surgery. He felt it went really well. He felt like they got it all, but obviously there's no guarantees. He still thought it was a benign tumor, but pathology had to come back before we could say that. The day we got out of the hospital, we were getting discharged, was a week later. She was in for a week. That's the day we got the pathology results back. And the pathology showed that it was a malignant tumor, and it was a very slow-growing type of cancer, hepatocellular carcinoma, fibrolamellar variant, whatever that means. But it was slow-growing, and the only way to get rid of it was to resect it, surgically resect it. It doesn't respond to chemotherapy, radiation, none of that.
So are they optimistic that they'll be able to remove it completely, or? They
were optimistic they got it all. Again, no guarantees, but optimistic, because the doctors obviously can't see on that cellular level. The plan was to do a CT scan every 6 months and keep an eye on it, because if it started to come back, obviously they would be able to see it in the scans. So that surgery was April 30th, I believe, 1993. I was scheduled to get out May 31st to be discharged from the Marine Corps. My 6 years was up. We had a difficult decision to make. Do we get out? Do we stay in? If I stayed in, I knew what was going to happen. I'd end up getting shipped overseas again for another 6 months or more. I think the guys now are doing like 9-month tours, but I didn't really want to do that. I didn't want to leave her and our baby. But I knew that we knew that if I got out, insurance probably wouldn't cover her if it came back. So we had a decision to make. Do we step out in faith and go home with our family, or do we stay in? After some time, we decided to go ahead and get out. We felt like God was leading us to just go ahead and get out and go back home.
And so you moved back to Fort Wayne?
we moved back to Fort Wayne.
And how does life go there for the next few months with Angela?
It goes great. It's great to be home. Got a job, working at a cabinet company in Grable. Bought a house. Looking back, I honestly have no clue how financially we did it. I know how, it was a God thing, but we did it. We survived. We did all right. Things went really well until one of the CT scans, probably a year and a half later, picked up a spot.
And where was that, and what did the doctors think was going on at that point?
Well, they knew it was going to be the tumor coming back because it was on the liver again. The doctors here didn't feel comfortable messing with it, especially since Dr. Bunzendahl had already started it back in North Carolina. So they had some phone conversations with Chapel Hill, decided that it would be best if we would go back there for the treatment.
So you go to North Carolina for the surgery, and what happens?
The surgery again goes well. It was a little tougher for her. Didn't heal quite as quickly. Obviously, we were dreading it. Obviously, it was harder on Angie because of not having Kristen as close as she would have liked to have been. My sister lived in Winston-Salem. That's what this one was. So Kristen stayed there in Winston-Salem with my mom and dad, who also went down. My sister and her husband and my mom and dad took care of her. It was about an hour drive, if I remember right, Winston-Salem to Chapel Hill. There was some conflict, a little bit, family conflict there, but things ended up okay. She healed. It was a tough trip. Once she was well enough to drive, we put her back in the car and picked up Kristen and went back home. And then there was the struggle of all Angie ever wanted was a big family. So trying to get pregnant, Kristen was like, boom. Angie was pregnant and Kristen comes along. The next one was not as simple. It didn't seem like. I mean, we thought since Kristen was easy that the next one would come quickly, and it didn't happen that way. In fact, that was a long process after that second surgery of trying to get pregnant. She was very discouraged. We were this close to going to a specialist, talk to a doctor about a fertility doctor to see if there's something wrong. And then probably a year and a half later, another spot shows up. So they sent us to IU Medical Center. It was December the 20, I think it was just before Christmas. So the appointment, we had Kristen go to my mom and dad's, who lived in the south part of Fort Wayne.
Had you reconnected with the church at this point?
We were, as soon as we came back from the Marine Corps in 1993, we started going to Black Hawk.
Okay.
Amazing family, church family. Amazing church family. Very supportive, loving, truth-telling church.
And did you have health insurance?
We did, but we didn't think it was going to cover the cancer.
Oh, no.
The one bill I do remember getting was from IU Medical Center, which is where I was just starting to go, was the IU Med Center bill. We got some bills from them that were astronomical, in the 10, 20, 30 thousands of dollars bills for the angiogram she had while she was down there. I called them to set up some kind of a payment plan, and they said, well, we can work with you, but we need your last 3 years tax records, we need your pay stubs. And me, being the stubborn person that I am, was like, just hung up on them. I'm, no, you're not getting all that. I'm going to pay you back. It's going to take me a while, but I will pay you back, and I will tell you how much I can pay you. You're not going to tell me how much. Well, God has a way of breaking people down and taking care of that. Finally, I decided, okay, I called them back. I said, what do you need again? And they said this. So I got all this together. I sent it down to them. They sent me a letter back, and they forgave all the debt.
You're kidding me.
They wrote it off.
Unbelievable.
It was quite unbelievable.
That's a God thing, isn't it?
Very much a God thing. And then there were the times that we did have bills, obviously, that we had to pay, medical bills. I know I can think of 2 times. I think there might have been a third, but I'm not sure. I should have wrote it down. I wish I had wrote down dates and everything, but I didn't. I would go to the mailbox, and there would be a bill that needed to be paid. And there would be an envelope in the mailbox, and it would be a cashier's check, $1,000. And I had no idea who it was from. There was no way to find out that I know of. I don't know if I could have gone and traced it back, but I just was in tears. I couldn't believe it, that somebody would do something like that. To this day, I still don't know who it was. It doesn't matter. God told them to do it. And,
Yeah, isn't that something?
and they did it. They obeyed, and I was thankful. We were benefited, very much blessed by it.
So what happens at IU Med Center at that time, right around Christmas?
We went down for the imaging, for some further imaging. The angiogram. They asked her. They ran some tests, and they said, we'd like to run another test, an angiogram, so that we can get a better picture, because the tumor appears to be in a spot where where it's not going to be operable. They said we don't think they're going to be able to operate on it. They left the room. We cried for a while because we thought, this is it. This is it. It's going to be a matter of time. They came back in and said, the doctor, if you have time, the doctor would like to do an angiogram, because that will tell us for sure. But that requires a needle into the femoral artery, and you're going to have to be flat on your back for 8 hours. Do you have time to do it? We can do it now.
Oh, wow.
So I had to call back to my mom and dad, make sure that things were okay with our daughter, and they were. So we had that done. We got the results back almost immediately, and they said, well, it looks like actually that we are going to be able to, it's probably is operable. It's really close to the hepatic artery, but I think they can do it. We'll send the stuff down to North Carolina and let them look at it. So, and I forgot to tell you that on the way down to Indy, the snow and ice was incredible that morning. Discouragement. Satan loves to do that, loves to discourage us. On the road in 69, just out of Allen County. Slide off the road, end up in the median.
With you driving?
With me driving.
That's unlikely.
No, it's not unlikely, actually. So I'm out I was able to push the car back up onto the road and get back on the road and headed south. But just trying to be discouraged, trying to discourage us. But so they get the information down to IU Med Center down to North Carolina. And they schedule a surgery, another one.
In North Carolina is where it would take place?
In Chapel Hill again, yeah. So we go down for that. Oh, I almost left out, very important. Before the angiogram, the nurse says, okay, we're going to do this test. They explain what they're going to do. They're going to put dye in the artery, and it's going to go up through the veins, and we're going to do an x-ray. You're going to be laying on basically laying on an x-ray. Mm-hmm. She said, are you pregnant? We just looked at each other like, you got to be kidding. We had no clue. I mean, we've been trying for months and months and months, and it's not working. So we just look at each other, and she just said no. Well, I mean, what are you going to do? Right. You got this test that needs done. You've got a tumor.
Yeah.
So we go through with the test. A week later, she finds out she's pregnant.
My
so she
goodness.
was pregnant.
During the
test. Mm-hmm. And we just didn't know it.
Wow.
So it was a mixture of joy and fear.
Yeah, exactly.
So again, Satan tries to throw that fear in there. And it worked.
I believe it.
It worked.
So what do you do about the surgery?
Consult. Consult with doctors. She had we were seeing an oncologist in Fort Wayne at the time. I won't say his name because it probably wouldn't be the right thing, I don't guess, but he advised us to have an abortion. And that was the last day we saw him. I told him, I think I did it tactfully, but I told him that he was full of it and that was never going to happen. And we left. Ange was very much on board with that, very much on board. So we end up talking and finding out that, okay, they can do the surgery while she's pregnant, but they either want to do it during the first or the last. I forget how that worked, but there was a certain time period windows that they could do it comfortably. They left it up to her. We thought and prayed and cried, and she said, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to put the baby at risk any more than we probably already have. We'll wait till after the baby's born. So that's what she did. She wanted to wait. In the meantime, we were doing all this, trying to do this holistic, some of this stuff, food, different diets and things. And so Joseph came along on August the 29th, 1996. It was scheduled to induce her. Took off work, obviously, went and to be with Angie at Parkview. The delivery was a little different. Her blood pressure was a little lower than they liked. They turned the epidural down because of her blood pressure, which caused her, again, some more pain. But the delivery went okay. She had asked me prior to this to go down and videotape the stuff they do in the nursery with the baby before I got too far along. So as soon as they took him out and went down to the nursery, I followed him down. Everything was going fine that I could tell when I left. Went down, did some videotaping for about 15 minutes. Came back upstairs, and I'd never forget the elevator doors opening up, and it was like mass chaos. There were people running everywhere. And I did not understand what was going on. I pushed my way and made my way through all the people to her room, which was off to the left. And as soon as I got in there, I saw blood everywhere. Some of the doctors or the nurses had blood on them. The floor was bloody, the pillow. I couldn't see her very well because there were so many people around her. And Dr. Baker, Ron Baker, grabbed my arm and pulled me out and said, there's a condition that's developed and we're having trouble getting the bleeding stopped. DIC, I don't know what it stands for. He said, if we can get the bleeding stopped, it's great. If not, we're going to have to do an emergency hysterectomy to save her life. Well, again, Angie, all she ever wanted to do was have a big family. So I knew that if they had to do that, that was going to be bad. He said, and also, do you have somebody that can come and be with you, a pastor or somebody? I'm like, I've been around long enough to know what that means.
You're with the force at this time?
I worked, this was 1996. I worked in the jail as a civilian confinement officer.
Okay.
I hadn't quite been hired yet. I called the church office. Forget who Russell, I should know who Russell's secretary was at the time, because it wasn't Lori Whitman yet.
No.
It was Marie Doty.
Marie Doty.
I called Marie, and I explained to her that they said I should call somebody. And she said, well, I'll send somebody over. I bet within 20 minutes, Arlen Friesen and Chuck Frederick showed up. And I cannot tell you what that meant to see their faces. We prayed, and just to see somebody when you're in that kind of a pit, you know, meant a lot. So
I had a similar situation when our first daughter was born. My wife was hemorrhaging, and they didn't know it. And they said if we had tried to have her at a house or something, that my wife would have died. And it's interesting, my great-grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad were all born in the same farmhouse. And I owned that farmhouse at the time. And my mom had put her foot down with me that I wouldn't be born there. She wouldn't have done that. I probably would have followed tradition, and she wouldn't have made it. Wow. So I get that, and I get the intensity of the situation. And then also, my pastor just seemed like he was there in minutes. And I know what that feeling is that you just described, when they're praying for you and you're feeling helpless.
Very helpless, completely helpless.
Yeah. So what happens to Angela?
So there was a doctor in the hospital that was able to get down in time to get some medicine in her to slow the bleeding. And they told me later that if that doctor hadn't been in the building, Angie would have died. So it's another one of those things in life where it just so happened, which you and I both know nothing just so happens. But He saved her life, but they did still have to do a hysterectomy. So they put her to sleep, and they did what they had to do. I went home that night, I think, and got a couple hours of sleep. And got up the next morning, and I was so angry that I got there. When I got there, she had already woke up. And she was she couldn't talk because she had a tube in her throat, and she was writing. I wish I'd say, I think I have these notes somewhere, but she had written what happened or something. And the nurse told her. So when I saw her, she knew. And it was devastating. And she really was depressed. She never really recovered from that.
From knowing
kind of a
that
depression.
she wasn't going to be able to have children anymore.
Yeah. So.
And Joseph, how was he?
Oh, he was great. I mean, he was good. He was healthy. Fun to have. It was hard because I left the hospital with him, and she was still in the hospital. They discharged him, but she was still there.
Yeah.
So I had to take him home, which I was, I'm okay with doing that, but that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Felt incomplete.
Yeah. And I tried to be at the hospital as much as I could with him. And just to see her holding him was memorable, I guess.
So what happens next with Angie?
She gets discharged. She heals well, gets discharged. The surgery is scheduled already for, I think, 2 months later, a month or 2 months later. So we know that's coming. We go back down to North Carolina now with 2 kids, and with more help, family. They do this surgery, and after this surgery, the outlook is not quite so good. Dr. Bunzendahl informs us that the cancer is morphing into not the slow-growing, non-aggressive type cancer that it was, but it's morphing into the more aggressive type of cancer. And he's concerned because he thinks they got it all, but it was so close to the Y, the hepatic artery or portal vein, or I forget what he called it, that they don't know if cells could have spread into the rest of the liver.